Hello and welcome. I'm starting this video off slightly differently because I wanted to relay one thing and one thing only. SWFA named this the UltraLight because that's exactly what they wanted this thing to be. They prioritized weight over everything else. And we have to keep that in mind because there's a couple things with it that are a little, I wouldn't say bad, just a little annoying, but within reason. Because again, they wanted this thing to be as lightweight as possible, and they absolutely smashed that head straight into the wood. So, with that in mind, let's finish this review and talk about it a little bit more afterwards.
This is a 2.5 to 10 by 32 powered optic that features a BDC reticle. Now there are 3 total versions of this: a rimfire one with a duplex and a 50-yard parallax, a standard duplex with a 100-yard parallax, and this one, which is an obviously second focal plane, and a 150-yard parallax. That's pretty much all you really need to know. The turrets do have a lot of slop, but once it clicks good.
Everything looks good. This being an MOA scope, there's going to be no real way for me to track this properly. So we're just going to give it a good old twisting.
Lines up perfectly with the elevation line. Perfectly back to zero.
Excellent job with the windage. And that's basically perfect.
I really need to make an MOA target so this way I could actually track all of these MOA scopes. Shame on me, I know. It's just I haven't had the time to calculate that one out yet. Alright, so here we are at 2.5x at our 30-yard power transformer, and we're greeted with a fairly clear, bright, sharp-ish image. There is not much of the scope body that you see, and to the naked eye, it is invisible. Unfortunately, due to limitations with cameras just being the way they are, you can't really relay that as well as you can in person. In person, it looks better. Here at 10x, the image is of course not going to be too focused because we have a minimum parallax setting of 150 yards, so we are well inside of that. Add to the fact that we were at 10x, and that's to be expected. Alright, so let's focus our attention on our 400-yard brick building. The 2x on this thing, rather the 2.5, is fantastic. It is flat, it is bright, it is crisp, it is clear. And to the naked eye, like I said, that body just completely disappears. It's magic what they managed to do with this thing, given the fact that it's a... nearly smashed my face into something. Given the fact it's a 1-inch tube, 32mm objective. We increased the magnification ever so slightly so you can get a taste or a feel of how this really looks in the intermediate magnifications. And now that we're here at 10x, you can see the image does soften up a little bit. And that's what I was talking about earlier. This thing is dedicated for weightlessness first, everything else comes a little bit second. However, this is still a better performance in my opinion than the Credo 2 to 10, which is 3 times the price basically. Don't forget everyone, this is a 150-yard fixed parallax, and that brick building's at 400 yards, so it's just outside the focal range that this thing should really be perfect at. And when we push our focus even farther out to 800 yards, you'll see that the 30-yard power lines and that 800-yard power tower is definitely outside the scope of this scope's focus. So everything's still pretty consistent. But let's change it up. Let's skip forward in the future a couple of weeks. It's obviously around Christmas time, and let's see how well this thing holds up in lower light environments. We start at 2.5 and crank our way up slowly to 10x. Take note of the color and the brightness of the sky as we increase the magnification. It's around 3 p.m. later part of December, so it's pretty dark, and it is overcast. Here, the image still looks about as soft as it was, but at least it seems like it's letting in a fair amount of light, and this is consistent with what I've seen in use. It's not too bad. But let's go a couple of hours farther out, and we already notice a significant brightness difference between the sky in the scope and the sky outside. It's much darker, and that's at the lower end of the magnification range. And as we increase it, take a look at the parapet wall. You're going to notice that it gets a little bit darker once we crack about 9x. And that's going to be pretty consistent with this thing. It's great to about 9, and 10 does get soft. Now again, kind of like how I said earlier, that to the naked eye, the scope body is much less noticeable. To the naked eye, the eye will focus a little bit better on the image. Again, this being a very rigid setup, there's only so much we can expect, but it's still not 100% perfect. More like 90 to 95, which is really, really nitpicking all things considered. But you know what? Good enough is good enough for a lot of people. And for them, I say great. If you're happy with something, awesome. But if you're looking for other lightweight alternatives for a pretty decent price, Leupold makes a lot of great stuff that's very lightweight and cost effective. Anyway, here we are at my home away from home. You might notice the brightness shift, and that is because it was a crystal clear blue sky day, and then these dark ass clouds rolled in and it made it look like it was pitch black outside. Anyway, 2.5 is absolutely awesome. It is a bright, flat, crisp image. It is incredibly easy to get behind, which you'll see more of why soon, and it's just fantastic. There's almost no distortion whatsoever. However, again, this being a fixed parallax of 150 yards, here at 50 yards at 10x, the image is not great. We have to back it out to about 6x, which is where we are right now, before we get an image that's pretty good. Depending on my mood, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so that's not half bad. But something that's phenomenal is just the sheer magnitude of the Eyebox at 2.5x. Forward to back is basically limitless. Side to side gets a little bit tight, but it is just incredible. Here at 6x, it gets a little bit more tight, but you can still be way off this thing and get an idea of how it's going to look through it, or where at least you have it behind it. It's incredible how well this thing performs in the lower magnification range given its size. 10x though is tight. You have to be right behind it. But again, just like any other magnified optic, the higher the magnification you go, the better your cheek weld, and the slower you just have to go. It's just the way it is. The one great thing though, the exit pupil does not shift depending on magnification. I've been wanting to get my hands on this thing ever since they first announced it a couple of years ago, and I didn't really know what to expect. I know SWFA produces really good stuff, and I was hopeful, but I knew there was going to be some sort of limitations to it. And it's just the 10x. Very similar to what we saw with the Trijicon Credo 2 to 10. This thing, being the fact that it does not have a side focus, is just lacking. And the fact that it's got a 1-inch main tube, 32mm front objective, I'm sure does not help ultimately. But by and large, the biggest problem with the scope is this. This is a 150-yard parallax setting, which means it should be set up so that at 150 yards, everything is in focus and on the same plane. Those paper targets at 100 yards, and that berm is at about 180, 190, and neither of them look good to me. It makes me wonder what the other two versions, the 50-yard and the 100-yard fixed parallax, would look like by comparison to this at these distances. You can clearly see on either side of the scope that the background image is perfectly clear. And a lot of people will probably say this because they say it in almost every video in the comment section, oh, well, why don't you adjust the eyepiece? The eyepiece adjustment is only for the reticle sharpness, nothing further. So with that being said, yes, there's a problem because the reticle is clearly nice, sharp, and clear, and the image just isn't, especially at the fact that we are at the distance where this thing is set to from factory to have proper parallax, and it should just be a little bit better than that. I think somewhere along the lines, either this isn't 100% set, or it's just they're asking a little bit too much of the glass. But going back to it again, beating that dead horse, to the naked eye, the image is clearer than it is on camera. But even here at 300 yards on the paper, 320 yards in the back, the paper just doesn't look all that great. We're nice and centered on the scope. You could see how the image looks on the body, but it's just like, it's not firing on all 8 cylinders. Every once in a while it gets a misfire. Now, that's not a deal breaker by any means. It's just a little annoying. But with that, let's get into my final thoughts real quick.
All right. So I might have been a little harsh with this thing, but I'm a harsh individual. I find the cavity and I just poke it. And I poke it and I poke it and I poke it and I see if it hurts. And I hate being like that sometimes, but it's just the way it is. I always look for the imperfections in things so this way I can elaborate on them a little bit more. Because this thing has a tremendous amount of things going right for it, despite the fact this thing is as limited as you could possibly get as far as an optic goes, with the exception of maybe a fixed power scope. So it's pretty impressive. The main selling point for this thing is the weight, and I mentioned that at the beginning of the video. And as a result, you have to keep in mind that some other things might have shortcomings, like I said. And it's around 10x. It picks up way better in person, way better to the natural eye. And despite the fact that I love this non-fast focus eyepiece in the rear, it's almost a little bit too much finite adjustability, because to really get your eyepiece focused properly on the reticle, you look through it, you come off of it, you close your eyes, you make an adjustment, you go back on it, you open your eyes, and you repeat that process. And with a fast focus eyepiece, a quarter of a turn is moving it in and out quite a bit. A quarter turn on this, because these fine threads, you can't even notice. So you almost get caught up in the minutia of it and be like, what did I even notice a change? It's like going to the doctor's office and getting an eye exam, and better one or better two, better one or better two. But the increments are so small that you can't really pick up on them, and it's just that for basically infinity, and that's actually almost a detriment. These threads need to be a little bit more coarse to really be able to pick that up, or you have to do 2 full turns and then go back to it. So as much as I love this, it is ironically harder to pick up when you are making a change. But once you get it right, you lock it up and you're good to go. Now, the whole reason why you buy this is because of the name, UltraLight, correct? Of course. Why else do you buy something like this? You're looking for something that's ridiculously lightweight. And you can buy some Loophole products that are around this weight. The VX Freedom series are not that much heavier, if any at all. But this is a Japanese-made, excellent scope. There's no way around it. And it would, I feel, pair really good with something else that's called an ultralight. This combo weighs less than 13 ounces. And this is a 30 millimeter tube version. This is a 1 inch. If this is a 1 inch version, it'd probably weigh a little bit less than that. So you buy this combination to have it be this way. And you have to understand that, just like the scope, this might not be 100% all the time. This, if you were to bump it into anything really hard or drop it, because the way this thing is designed to be, again, as lightweight as possible, it might not hold zero properly. It's just one of those things you have to accept. Now, while we're on the subject of weight, just to give you a comparison, I still have the Credo 2 to 10, which still breaks my heart. This thing is nearly twice the weight without a mount. What I have is a brand new box of 55 grain 223, and that comes in at 9 ounces. So, understandably, 2 of them should come in almost 18 ounces, which is 5 ounces heavier. So if this doesn't feel like a lot of weight, that combo is even lighter. This thing comes in at around $380 usually. And for that price, if you are looking for something like this that prioritizes weight over everything else, with an extremely forgiving low magnification Eyebox and decent brightness, it's during the daytime, it's awesome. During twilight, it's okay. And in the evening, it falls on its face, but that's just to be expected. For $380, I think it's pretty good. When you can find these on sale during their Black Friday, or I think 4th of July is another one, but their Black Friday in particular, because it comes with rings and all these other options, they're $300. And you're buying yourself a very high quality, Japanese-made ultralight optic that would bode well on almost any gun I could really think of. So with that being said, yes, I do recommend these. Yes, I am going to be keeping this. And that's it. Thank you all very much for watching. See you again next time.
And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.